A lot of clients don't know what it takes to get the job done, but should they? No. There are lots of pros and cons to your client not knowing, and the biggest one is that if they did know, they'd probably do it themselves. It can be a struggle with the fact that they don't know because they'll put insane expectations and deadlines on them. But this is where you have to decide, is this within my limitations? Is this going to be a benefit for me to do? That's up to you. I've been in the commission business doing illustrations for several years now. I've had the benefit of working with relatively reasonable clients, but I have had the occasional client from hell, as they are called. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of a client's knowledge, how to gauge your work, and dealing with difficult clients. In an article by Paul Skurtswerda, he talks about what your client doesn't need to know. One of them being is that telling your client that you're new. They really shouldn't know that you're new, because they're going to question whether your work is going to be quality or on time, being that you don't have anything to reference, because you're new. They really don't need to know, and they probably won't know unless you tell them. Another thing he talks about is personal problems. You really don't want to bring them up in a client versus commissioner relationship because they aren't going to care. Whether they may be kind or courteous doesn't matter because they have a job they need to get done and they need you to get done. And any personal problem, unless it is causing you to be physically unable to do the job, is going to come off as an excuse. And lastly, he talks about should the client know the cost of your business. When you buy a pair of shoes, do you care about how much the shoe store pays them all? When you go into a dinner, do you dicker with the waiter over the price of the ingredients? Does a merchant complain about the fees they pay for a credit card company? That is a quote from Paul Skurtswerda. And the answer to these questions is no, you don't. So why should you tell your client about where their money is going after you get the job done? It really doesn't matter. There is also an article from Dana Winslow talking about the 5 biggest mistakes that freelancers should avoid, but often make, and I can attest to most of these. The first being that you really need to know your worth as a commissioner or as a freelance artist. There is a very tempting and ideal that goes through the freelance business is that you should make your prices cheaper or give discounts, and this is often not a good idea. A lot of people aren't going to go for prices that are very low because they, as Dana Winslow says, they want a lot of bang for their buck. This is being that they are going to want to pay a higher price because that is almost saying that my work is worth this price. So they're going to go for that. The next thing she talks about is when to shut up. And that may sound kind of crude, but it really is important. You need to know when you aren't able to do the job and when to turn a client down, whether it is on your part or on their part. And it's not a problem either way. You just need to know, am I able to do this work? Is this client really unreasonable and somebody I'm not going to be able to work with? And the next thing you need to know, as we've referenced already, is giving away too much information. You really don't want to, because if they did know everything, then they're going to want to do it themselves. You almost want it to be a little bit of a mystery because you want them to take on your work. And so whether they know or not is not really a big deal. The last article I'm going to reference is an article by Oliver Gitschem, called Finding the Balance Users Need versus a Client's Wants. And this is very good when dealing with a difficult client, because what will happen is you'll probably do work, and then they'll ask you to change it, and this will happen several times. They may even ask you to go back to a previous work that you've shown them. And you need to decide when to stand up for yourself. The client isn't always right. Most of the time they are, but there are times it can be appropriate to give your input. But when you do give your input, you really need to sell it. You need to tell them why what they're suggesting isn't a good idea, and why they should change it. All in all, you want to be the master of your own art, knowing what you're capable of doing and which clients are going to be your best bet. Remember not to give your clients your secrets. If they knew, they'd probably do it themselves. Lastly, they may be the clients, but you're doing the work, so make it work.